Okay, we have 6:30, so I'll go ahead and call the meeting order. Let's start with the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Brandon, if you get a chance, there's a sign sheet. Anybody else to hear whether you want to speak or not, please sign in just so we have it for a minute. The first item of our meeting is to approve the minutes from our January 4th preliminary determination hearing. We had our first meeting, so I entertain a motion to approve those minutes as presented. Motion by Matt Eckert. Second by Nate Schuler. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion carried. Next item on the agenda is we're going to have our hearing. Basically, it's going to hold our project and preliminary hearing on the proposed project. Again, anyone that's interested in speaking, we do ask that you please sign the paper over here with your name and address. After we have a presentation by administration and our advisors, there will be an opportunity to the public to make comments to the project. During the hearing portion, we will ask each person to try and limit their comments to 3 minutes, and I'll kind of keep track of that time. And at the topic, we focus on this project. We're not here to talk about lawn mowing or any other thing that could be on your mind tonight. And this is the notice of this preliminary determination hearing was published as legally required. Our first meeting was held last Wednesday. At this time, I'll ask Dr. Quinn to explain the purpose of the hearing.
Sure, thanks, Ben. Pursuant to Indiana law, before a school corporation can spend more than $1 million to build, repair, alter, renovate a school building that will be financed by a lease or a bond, it must hold a public hearing at which the estimation of the potential value of the project to the school corporation and the community are given. Also similar to Indiana law, school corporation must hold 2 public hearings and adopt a resolution to preliminarily determine to issue bonds or enter a lease for a project which has a total project cost in excess of a non-controlled project, or the school corporation has a debt service fund tax rate above a certain amount. So these public hearings, the one we had last week and then this one right here, are part of the beginning of this legal process. So the resolutions that will be presented later on at this meeting, they establish the maximum financial terms for this project.
Next, I'd like Dr. Quinn to share information about the process of determining and communicating the project to the community and the need for this project.
Sure. So this really where we're at right now is part of, I would say, a very long ongoing process that started all the way back in the fall of 2022. So whenever I'm just, thinking about my role as a superintendent, obviously facilities or buildings, the way that we operate, it's a big part of, what I do is a big part of our focus as a community. And one of my goals, and I know one of the goals of the board, is that we really wanted to develop a long-term master plan for our facilities. And that involves some, I'd say, big projects, along with just some of the minor things that we do in order to efficiently operate our buildings. And putting together a long-term master plan for our facilities has been quite a process, but I feel pretty good about where we are now and what we've done to get to the point of having a pretty solid understanding of what things look like for our buildings for Southeast Dubois in the future. So one of the first steps with this process was engaging with Stefano Group. And Stefano Group, they represent a lot of school corporations throughout the Southern Indiana area. And they were recommended to me by some other superintendents as just a partner that we could engage in order to help us with this process. And they did a fantastic job of doing just a deep dive into our facilities and looking at what some of our immediate needs are that we really need to adjust within the next month, the next year, and then also thinking about pushing out long-term, what do we need to do? What's the longevity? What's the, the lifespan of some of our systems that we have in place in each of our buildings. And with that information, we got, let's say, a book of things that we really need to focus on here at Southeast Dubois. And I think that a lot of us in this room right now can identify with and understand that the needs here at Southeast Dubois within our buildings are great. There are a lot of things that we need to do in order to update, renovate, and just operate efficiently. So with that information that we were provided with the Stefano Group, we then took that and we wanted to know what our staff was thinking, because we had a list of things that we felt needed to be done in the future, but our staff, they're spending a lot of time in this building and they provide a lot of input to us in regards to what's going well, what are some of the needs. So we want to tap into their perspective to figure out what it was that they see, feel, and hear on a daily basis. So we took that facility study and we took all those needs and we said, here's our list. Now prioritize from your perspective. You're in our buildings every day. How do you feel as a staff member? And we took all that survey data, we compiled that all together, and that was then presented to our school board. From that point, we understood that our community members are a very important part of this process as well. So we engaged a focus group of community members from throughout Southeast Dubois that were representative of each of the townships that we had. And we pulled them in and we met monthly starting it was January of 2024 when we started our Ranger Reno collaborative group. And we took time, we started out at Cedar Crest, and within each building, the building principal took us on a tour and we got to see some of the things that are happening within that building, both good and areas of improvement. And we also then looked at the data. We looked at the data from the facility study, we looked at the data from the staff survey, and we just started talking about, okay, we take all this information, what are the priority areas that we're seeing from our building tours, that we're seeing from the Stefano Group's facility study, and that we're hearing from our staff members. There was a lot of information to process within those meetings, but we met monthly then through October 2024. And then, with that helped us to narrow our scope down even further. So, in taking all that information, we were able to then identify these are priority areas, and really these are priority buildings because we have some buildings that are newer than others. Different things have been done throughout the years. But I think what we heard from the group then is that there were certain buildings, certain needs that took a higher priority than others. Not to say those needs in the other buildings weren't important, because they are, but certainly you have to prioritize. And that's what we were able to do. And then taking that to the next step of led us to where we are right now, as far as working with Gibraltar, the Stefano Group, Steeple, is similar through our finances, our bond council, to be able to say, okay, what can we do from a financial perspective? What is reasonable for us to borrow, and how does that align with all of the needs that we have at Southeast Dubois? So, I think throughout that process, it's been pretty thorough. We have done, I would say, lots of reports out to the board, throughout the past several years. You guys are familiar with the fact that some of these faces that we have sitting out here right now are familiar faces here, and they've been here at board meetings quite often to do a monthly report out, updates on what we were learning and how the process was going. So we're finally at that point right now of identifying, conceptually what those priority areas are, and starting that legal process to move forward with borrowing and moving forward with projects. So with that said, this visual I think is a nice visual because it shows that there was, several different groups that helped us get to the point that we are right now. The staff survey, which I mentioned earlier, work from the Step Novel group, the Ranger Reno, our community focus group, Gibraltar Design, and obviously that facility study. So all of those pieces have gone into getting us to the point where we are right now. The other thing that we talked about is, moving forward, our focus on coming up with a long-term plan. We understand and looking at the learning environment, things are changing often. So it's hard sometimes to look out 20, 30 years and identify what a classroom is going to look like. Because we know that things are changing pretty fast. But, one of the pieces that I think, have spent a lot of time talking about is that, when you're in a building that is 50 years old, looking at the classroom design, looking at the environment, looking at the way that we structure a learning environment, doesn't fit the needs of where we are right now in education and, what we need to best serve our students. And that's one thing that we want to be mindful moving forward is ensuring that we're creating a learning environment that is, from a facility standpoint, appropriate for our kids. And the other thing is the way that we operate is very important as well. So when we look at, balancing function, operational needs, the mechanical side of things, there's a lot that we need to do, that we need to focus on, that we do not always see whenever we enter a building. We want our people to enter a building and we want them to be comfortable, and ensuring that what is going on behind the walls and ceilings is working, functioning appropriately is really important. And we're at a point right now where much of our equipment is so outdated, we can't find parts, nor can we find people to work on them because those people have all retired. So we're looking at our systems that are functioning very inefficiently now, and the cost that is being tied into our utilities and how expensive our utilities are because we are operating very inefficiently. That's something that we had a lot of discussion with because it costs a lot of money, but it's also creating a lot of problems for us internally and not being able to just operate efficiently and fix things appropriately without spending a ton of money on very outdated equipment. So part of what we've talked about is ensuring that whatever we do from a just mechanical, electrical perspective, that's something that it's not glamorous, but it's a huge need for us and a huge focus for us moving forward in order to operate efficiently. And with that said, I think I'll turn things over to Dale from Gibraltar.
Thank you, Dr. Fine, members of the board. Glad to be here again tonight. So we'll walk through this. On the next slide, if you can. So, as we look at buildings, we keep these 4 things in mind. I'm not going to read all these out to you word by word, but function, value, efficiency, and schools of the future. Dr. Fine had mentioned the school of the future of keeping it flexible. I know a lot of the work, I've been doing this a long time, but some of the stuff that I did back in the 90s doesn't really fit in the 21st century, and especially 2025, and who knows what it look like in 2035 and 2045. So we also want to keep an eye on the efficiency of your equipment is dated, and as we replace that, it'll be much more cost effective and efficient and some cost savings, because we all know energy is not going to go down, I don't think, in the future years. It'll be going up. So, which will actually help on your operation side of the building as well, to save some of those dollars, or at least get it where it's stable thing with efficient equipment. So, starting with Ferdinand Elementary School, and not a lot going on with this building, but there is some things, and one is school safety, which is on mind with all school administrators and boards across the country, I think. And so this building does not have what dubbed as now as a secure entrance, secure vestibule. So that's what we would be doing, would be modifying the entrance so that you have to come in and check who you're going to see before you release into the population of the building. So it is a checkpoint to check in. So that would be occurring, so there'd be some renovation going on, not a great deal of renovation, but there will be some renovation in that office area and entrance. The other thing that we're looking at improving at Ferdinand that is really worn out is the restrooms that are original to the building that date back to the 1950s. If you know any antique dealers, you might want some of the pictures out of it. It's that old, that's the value possible. But anyway, that would be a pretty heavy renovation in that area. And bringing all those up, obviously in the 1950s, they wasn't concerned about ADA requirements. So it would be brought up to ADA compliant as well. And then another set of restrooms, we would do kind of a refresh and relook at those as well. So that's pretty much all for Ferdinand. Touching for a minute. Moving on to Forest Park Junior Senior High School, starting with the site plan, we have, the green areas are potential addition that we're looking at, that we're exploring. And then there is a little bit of red, and that's actually the roof. Your roof is in decent shape for the Stefan group study, but there is a portion of it that is at the end of its life that we would recommend replacing as part of this project. The addition, main entrance currently is here. So the cafeteria would be off of what you're probably used to. Some people call it the 1970s addition, which is say built in 75. That's essentially where the kitchen cafeteria service coming in. It would take a little bit of the asphalt parking that is there currently. So that's one addition. The other we'll look at when we get to the upper level is the gymnasium. And this option would tear down, and I'll be mentioning a little later on, essentially it's dubbed the 1950s, the original Forest Park Junior Senior High School, with the junior senior high school or junior high school gymnasium, and then the cafeteria on the lower level, and the upper level has the classrooms. All that would be torn down. Okay. So this is the lower level, main level of the school. The cafeteria that's here currently, which is going away. The new cafeteria, which would be off this 1970s portion, with a new serving kitchen, new entrance area, all deliveries and everything like that would be worked out. So that's the cafeteria addition to replace the cafeteria down here. It's just slightly larger, not a whole lot. So it's almost a one-for-one in terms of the square footage. The kitchen would be probably a little bit more efficient, what you have right now in terms of the newer equipment, the way it's laid out. We would have a chance to do that. We are having some restrooms off the cafeteria as well. So the other addition on this level is a couple of classrooms. If you look at all this, remember we're going to tear down the 1950s building, so there's classrooms, not a lot on that upper level, but there are classrooms that we would have to replace, so we would do that. We're going to gain some other classrooms by moving some spaces around within the building to make it more efficient. And one of those spaces is the clinic, and your guidance right now is away from your existing administration area. The existing office area right now is here and into the building. Again, the secure entrance and things would be addressed. We're proposing moving that office area to the exterior of the building. There are some classrooms there that we would take over, but then the area where the nurse and clinic there, that would become classrooms, so that would be renovated into classrooms. And it would be nice to have all those services and all those student support spaces in one area, so you're not coming across the building to do things with the guidance nurses, whatever. So they would all be here together and can function very well. Be a conference room, of course. And then the space that is the administration office area right now would become the special ed. So we felt that would be good to have closer to the main entrance things for parents dropping students off. The other area you can see and everything in red is like heavy construction. When defining the heavy renovation, that's essentially, you want to think of it as we probably had some friends that had a house, well, we're just going to gut the kitchen. So that's pretty much what we're doing here. I mean, everything's coming out and we're starting fresh. The band choir has been a concern, but some of the studies, things that you've seen, some of the reports that we got back, in terms of door access and just access to buildings. So we would renovate the band and choir. Right now it's a stepped situation, which is no longer functional. It's dysfunctional again. So everyone wants to say they look one level in terms of the music, choir and band. We would have a practice room, and it has expanded. There is a classroom here that we're going to take over. We wanted to make it just a little bit bigger than what we had to accommodate the space. So that would be a total rework. The classrooms where we used to be guidance and the clinic is also being reworked. And then all the other blue spaces that you're seeing around, which is a light renovation, classrooms, whatever, it's more refresh and getting it looking new without doing a great deal of work. Just a couple other spots to touch on that we're doing, like a medium renovation, which is maybe not tearing everything out, but it would be a significant that the people that go there now and then they would come later after the project is done would see a difference. They would notice the difference. That is in the auditorium area. And again, that's kind of a 1970s version auditorium, which is pretty out of date and needs some work to kind of bring that up to a little more functional space. Not functioning very well for the staff. And then we're also looking at FACT, which again is a older 1970s version FACT. And FACT is taught quite a bit different. There's quite a bit of different things that they teach FACT now versus what was doing 50 years ago. And art, and then we would have a flex space as well that we would create. There's a couple of restrooms that we would do some renovation to, maybe not to the extent of tearing everything out, but it would get renovated to look pretty fresh and new. I think that's it for the lower level. Upper level, main thing happening on the upper level is the junior high gymnasium that would be new after we tear down the old gymnasium. And you can start to see a little bit of where the old gymnasium had the red dash line and the classroom, second floor classroom. We would reskin where we take that off because that will be exposing the 1970s building. And then, so the gymnasium, it would hold about 750 seats. And the bleachers, obviously, we would hold more just seating set up on the floor, playing floor, playing basketball. And then there's some locker rooms, new locker rooms that we would be in. The locker rooms you have now are dysfunctional and obviously not ADA compliant, code compliant, all that. So we would bring all that up to code compliant. And then the entrance, we felt, need some kind of surge space when you're halftime or something like that. We do have concessions that we're building into the project. And then we're expanding the restroom because there's a minimum restroom that you have to have for a assembly space, and we're a little bit short of that, so we would have to add some additional restrooms. It makes it handy because you got restrooms close by, so you have to do all that. There is some refresh that we would do on this level as well, like refresh. But on this floor, that's mainly the gymnasium. Okay. Then, as mentioned earlier, we don't want to. It is built into the budget to pick up some of the preventative maintenance items. Maybe a rooftop unit that is starting to struggle, and you're having a lot of repair costs on it. We would try and include those and replace some of those as the need arises. These are the things that I know keep administrators up at night because you never know when it's going to break. It never breaks at a good time, so just be prepared, trying to be proactive and creating some preventative maintenance. And one item is the roof that some re-roof some of the schools as well. And so we are thinking about just more than 4 parts of another maintenance item. So schedule and cost. So the schedule, we're at preliminary determination hearing number 2 tonight. We have had some previous presentations that Dr. Pine mentioned earlier, and we'll continue to have some in the future for up to date and well. Right now, big picture wise, we would essentially start design probably in July, August, and that would extend in through the rest of the year as we work through the details and working out, you know, some of the designs we've seen. I think it's very preliminary what we have, and then we'd probably be ready to go out for bid sometime in the spring of 2026 with the goal, and that's a pretty good time. We want to kind of watch that because there is some as Seth will tell you, there are some ideal times when we want to bid, and I know bidding right around the holidays is a challenge. We usually get high bids or no bids, so we would probably avoid that. So it's but if you get to the spring, whatever, before people get all booked up and get their summer booked up, because ideally, you know, if your building is fully occupied, you really want to capture as much of that summer work right out of the gate as you can. And that would continue through 2026 into 2027. And, you know, the last bullet point on the right, it is going to be a multi-stage project. So just because of the way you're using the building with the fully utilized spaces, but we will just methodically work through it, working with your staff, and hopefully they can see that get through this a little bit more, and it will be much nicer on the other end. And then the cost, you know, the cost for Ferdinand, and then for the junior, senior high school, and these are all inclusive of hard and soft costs. So I do want to point that out. And in soft costs is to think about things that are not built in, like the table and chairs that are here would be considered soft costs, phones, any kind of technology, buying computers, those kinds of things. Plus, in addition to, you know, fees and legal fees, and since we're going to talk to you here about bankers, so the costs that they have, so all that, attorney fees, permitting, all that is wrapped up in soft costs of building. Right there. I think that was, yeah, I'm going to turn it over to
Dale, two things I asked you last week. There's people that weren't here might talk a little bit about. We're putting a carryover on whatever this tree, it's cracking the wall, and we've got, I had a parent tell me they can patch paper through the outer walls, and then same with the gymnasium, and you had the structural engineer. Just share a little bit about what the feedback was when those guys came through, so people understand.
Yeah,
we're looking at possibly changes that we are in those areas.
Yeah, so we that was voiced a few months ago by a member of the board that especially in the gymnasium, you know, to your assembly space, whatever, and there's some pretty significant cracks that he had concern. So we had our structural engineer come down. He walked down, got stuff over there as well. They walked through, did a pretty detailed thing, took some pictures, whatever, and he put together a report on it. And you know, it's like it's not at a failure, it's not going to fail, but it may look unsightly to you, and you may not like the cracks there, but you know, it has been there over, you know, 60, 70 years. So cracks do happen in a structure of that stuff. But you know, the serviceability of it, it's really through the serviceability in life. And you would have to do significant work on that building to get it up to code compliant and to address all the things that you can see. And some of that would be probably tearing out and rebuilding, which on a building, existing building is not an inexpensive endeavor. So his recommendation is that you consider building new. But, thank you. That help? No?
Hi, good evening, Luke Brugman with Steeple. We serve as the bond underwriter for the school corporation. These are the exact same slides that we walked through last week. Really, the only difference is the maximum parameters that we'll show at the end. These will be in a resolution set forth in front of you tonight. The first thing that we always start with when we're structuring a new bond issue or new bond issues is what are the school corporation's current debt obligations. And we've highlighted that here. You'll see there's a little bit of a drop in 27, again in 28, and then finally in 29. And ultimately, the school corporation is out of their current debt obligations by the end of 2029. So when you're looking at a new project and taking on new debt to fund that, this is exactly what we want to see, because it allows us to minimize the taxpayer impact. If you flip to the next slide, this is the current debt service fund tax levy. It's essentially just a function of your payments and factoring in some of the miscellaneous revenue and cash that you have on hand in your debt service fund. So you'll see that that mirrors the payments on the previous slide. Again, you'll see the drop in the levy beginning in 27, 28, and 29. As we move to the next slide, this would be the funding of the $45,230,000 project. That is the maximum number. We can always come down from that. Our plan here is to issue this in phases as you need based on the construction timing. So we don't want you to borrow all 45 million when you may only need a small portion of that. There's no reason to pay interest on that. So this is just kind of a starting point. We know this is going to fluctuate based on when the Stefano Group and Gibraltar gets bids back. But just as a starting point, this would be a roughly $10 million project for bond issue in 26, 12 million in 27 and 28, and finally about 10.5 in 2029. And the idea here is that we're going to stair step up the tax rate. So ultimately the taxpayer impact is not felt all at once, it's incrementally on an annual basis. We also want to make sure that we are leaving some capacity, if we can, in the future, knowing that this is going to take care of a lot of your projects. It's not going to take care of all of your needs over the next 20 to 30 years. So we do try to leave some capacity or flexibility for the school in the future if needs do happen to arise. So you'll see that there in 27, 28, 29, where we stair step that up. There was a recent bill passed, Senate Enrolled Act 1, that changed the mechanics of the tax bill. Because of that, we feel like we are illustrating this in a worst case scenario. Likely will be better than this from a taxpayer perspective, but just given that it passed fairly recently, and we want to make sure that we're being as conservative as possible for the taxpayer. So this equates to a 65-cent debt service rate based on the 25 net assessed value. The mechanics may change, and likely the taxpayer impact is better than this, but again, we want to go kind of an absolute worst case scenario as we're starting out the legal process. So of that 45,230,000, you'll see on the left a pie chart there. In blue is the hard and soft construction cost. In gray would be the cost of issuance to pay your professional fees, your underwriter, rating agency, lawyers, trustee, local counsel, title insurance, all those sorts of things. That equates to 950,000. You'll see that broken down on the right-hand side in that table of how that equates to each bond issue. So for example, the 26 bonds, the $10 million hard and soft construction cost, 238,000 per cost of issuance, a total borrowing of 10,230,000. I won't walk through each one of those, but you'll see the total there that lines up to what we show on the previous or on that pie chart on the left-hand side. These cost of issuance numbers, they're likely higher than what they will actually be. So any additional dollars would be allowed to flow into the construction costs or simply reduce the borrowing amount. The other benefit that we have by phasing in the bond issues is that if we get to 2029, bids came in lower, construction costs come in lower than expected, you can always reduce that final borrowing amount. So again, we're showing the worst case scenario, but this really provides the school corporation with a lot of flexibility. If we get to 29, you have those decisions to make if you're funding alternates or just simply reducing the amount based on the projects that we've discussed tonight. As far as the taxpayer impact, again, we feel like this is a worst case scenario here. On the left-hand side, I know there's a lot of numbers up there and it's a little small. The average home in Southeast Dubois, based on the most recent Census Bureau data, is 194,500 is their assessed value. That does not factor in the standard or supplemental deduction. Once you factor that in and factor in this tax rate impact, it gets you to an annual impact of just over $280 annually, or about $23 monthly. Also with Senate Enrolled Act 1, they also passed, well, part of that bill was a homestead credit up to $300 that all homeowners would receive. That is not factored in here. So again, we feel like this is worst case, like the homestead credit of up to $300 is not factored into this annual limit.
Sorry.
No, you're
I
good.
was not.
Lastly, again, the maximum parameters, these are the same parameters that we walked through last week. Maximum borrowing amount, $45,230,000. We just walked through the breakdown on the prior slides, getting you to a hard and soft project cost of $44,280,000. Estimated interest rate of 3 to 7%. If you sold the bonds today, you'd be at around 4%. Everything that we ran is based on a 5% rate, so we have about a percent cushion in there. Again, trying to be conservative, trying to show a worst case scenario, and obviously hoping that things turn out better than that. Maximum term of the bonds would be 20 years per series. The estimated interest cost there just over 32.4. That's based on that higher interest cost. And then simply a maximum annual payment. That's the max payment that you can make from all of the bond issues combined in any given year. And then ultimately what we showed on the previous page is the increase due to this project of 0.3067. So that does factor in some of the debt dropping off and showing what we feel is a worst case scenario for the taxpayer. School corporations, the ratio is at the bottom there. The school corporation's max payments as a percentage of your net assessed value is 0.7195. And then lastly is the direct and overlapping debt as a percentage of your net assessed value. That's just simply looking at all of the other municipal entities' property tax backed debt. So your county, town, library, school, everyone as a percentage of your net assessed value. And that's 9.47%. Those, again, all this will be in the resolutions that you review tonight. And we can always come down from these numbers, but they are maximums that we're setting, designed to give the school corporation flexibility as you work through this process. That's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions that administration or the board have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we're to the point where we're in the public hearing. As I mentioned at the beginning, we did ask everybody to sign in. I will call your name and ask you to just speak your name and address. We do ask that any comments are limited to this project and financing. We'll try and keep you at 3 minutes just for the sake of everybody's time. Share what you want in 3 minutes. We've got the sign-up sheet, and basically you'll be addressing Dr. Flynn and I and the board, but we'll probably rely on our experts here to answer anything that you might have that we're not familiar or able to answer directly. But and if you didn't sign, if you want to speak, and at the end I'll ask again if you do, you can always let you change your mind at that point. So the first one that's listed here, Kurt Fleck. No, okay. Dan Orr, did you want to say anything?
Well, I obviously didn't catch the storyline when this board decided to still stay with a 4-school infrastructure. What it looks like is Vernon Elementary, which I was there as a 6-year-old 64 years ago. Vernon Elementary, it looks like you're just changing the entrance to be safer, and you're finally addressing a lot of the plumbing problems. The same plumbing problems that my 93-year-old father-in-law has in his house. You know, it just doesn't get it. Doesn't look like much happening there at all. And I was anticipating you'd maybe be shrinking it, because anytime I've been in there over the last 20 years, there's empty classrooms, there's, you know, all that type of thing. So the question I have is, the board firmly stated that you're keeping 4 buildings?
At this time, that is the plan, yes. The challenge is, and going back to the studies that they work with, the amount of money we can borrow versus the amount of money we would need to do everything we want to do would have to probably be triple of what we're allowed to bond for. And the high school is probably has the most issues of all of our schools, and Vernon Elementary is right behind it. So that's why we're addressing the security issues. And I've been complaining about those bathrooms for a lot of years on the board, so we're finally going to fix them so our kids have all the restrooms working and not just part. So they mentioned trying to keep some funding but options for down the road. And Vernon Elementary is definitely one of the buildings that we would like to address more issues. And we continue to try to work in things at all the buildings that we can do without having to bond for it as time allows and money allows.
Is the board still seeing student population rising in the future? What's your forecast?
It's not rising, but now there's potential of bringing
Preschool?
3-year-olds into the school systems. You know, they're starting to bring even younger ones in, which require more classrooms. And with all the requirements with a lot of the, you know, bringing this special ed section up front, same way with all the buildings. A room might seem empty, but it might be that we need a room for 1 or 2 kids only for a portion of the day. So it's really hard to say we have too many rooms when you're not there all day, every day. I understand what you're saying. It looks like they're empty, but at some point in the day, those rooms are used for certain situations that we have to address. As a public school, we don't turn anyone away, and that's really where our big beef with some of the privates and charters and then where they handpick who they take, so they're not held to the same standards. They would be if they accepted those kids, they just don't accept them. We accept them all, and we're doing everything we can to educate them, so we use some of those rooms for those situations that maybe doesn't have a kid in there but 1 or 2 hours a day in some of those buildings.
So Dan, to directly answer your question in regards to our enrollment, kind of what we're seeing right now with our enrollment, we've been stable actually over the past several years. But whenever you look at the trend data and you take all that data, we typically lose, I would say between 5 to 10 students per year that we see our enrollment decreasing. So we did have a demographic study done last November, December, and that study pushed out to the next 10 to 15 years. And it did verify kind of what we are seeing in regards to losing 5 to 10 students a year. But then 10 years from now, things flatten out again, and we see our enrollment actually starting to peak a little bit 10 years from now. So that from the demographic study we've had done is what the data shows us.
Well, again, it sounds like you're solid on 4 buildings. We're not gonna do like all the other school corporations in Dubois County analyzed and executed a reduction in buildings and a consolidation.
At this time, that's not a plan. I mean, and it was definitely discussed with the rental group through all that. And, you know, even if we consolidate, we still have to address the high school. And the high school is the most pressing. And again, we don't have the funds to try and consolidate.
Well, that's assuming you're keeping junior high in the high school arena. You know, we have lots of land out there at Cedar Crest.
Yeah, but to build a new building, the enrollment out there would then grow, would need more rooms. So the cost would still exceed what we need to do at this school and build out there. And we have definitely looked at those items along the way.
Good.
And just, you know, to Ken's point, when we look at the junior high model, things have really changed with our junior high students from a curriculum perspective. And a lot of our junior high students, they're engaged in high school level classes. You know, most of our 8th grade students are taking high school level classes where they need high school teachers in order to get that credit at the 8th grade level. In addition to some of the career tech, family consumer science, like some of those more elective based opportunities, which we feel are really important to our kids. We would move the junior high out to Cedar Crest, then think about the opportunities that would potentially be lost for those kids just from a curriculum elective perspective, because we need the space and some of the, you know, the opportunities, the classrooms, the equipment that we have provided here at Forest Park. It definitely poses a challenge by having junior high students out at Cedar Crest. So,
Thank you.
but yeah, I appreciate your comments and your questions. Thank you.
Brandy, your side,
Okay. Thank you.
Scott, anybody else?
No, I thought it made sense what you're doing to push the money into the high school where we have 7 through 12. All of our kids from the whole corporation come here for 6 of their years, so, and it's the most pressing. And we walking through it, it's just jaw dropping to see where it has become, because we did what we could do, but it's time to make the move. Spending that money here and reserving a lot of changes you're not making externally to those buildings gives you that look in the future to maybe realign and do things differently. So I think this makes sense to me.
I'll add on to what Scott said with that one. We have, if you walk past our school buildings from the exterior, they look good. We have people who take care of them, and you can tell that they put a lot of pride into what it is we do on a daily basis. So at surface glance, we look like we've got things going, but when you get in there and you start digging into it, and you see the carpet and the holes in the walls that are moved, and you can feel the heating and the air issues that are going on inside the schools. It's a much different story, spending all those times and all that time inside the classrooms, and even just touring them. So, I mean, kudos to the teams that have been taking care of everything and maintaining it as well as they have for all the years that they've been doing it. But it's needed.
Well,
Can I just ask, because that's what I'm getting asked, so I'd like to put the paper, like a little bit of a time frame of, or what you're gonna do with the kids, or how you're gonna handle as you're tearing things out and building things up. I'm getting that question more than any.
we,
I don't know.
we are still working on those plans.
Working on logistics.
As we work through the design, what sections we can do when, because obviously you have someplace to go before you tear a section down. So
Right.
we still have to work through that. I mean, there's a lot of discussion, but we can't answer that at this time.
Okay. That's fine.
Kids will still be coming to school. We will not have you learn for 4 years. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. At this time, I will close the hearing. Our next action, we're going to ask Lauren to summarize the project resolution for us.
Thank you. I'm Lauren Seiler, ISMO Service Bond Counsel for the School Corporation. So we have a couple of resolutions before the board today, all related to approving the project that's been discussed, as well as the potential financing. The first resolution before you is a project resolution. It's required anytime the school corporation plans to issue bonds and spend $1 million or more of bond proceeds at any given facility. The project resolution contains certain of the financial parameters that we've already previewed with you, including the total project costs, the hard and soft construction costs and cost of issuance that go into that, as well as the estimated tax impact.
At this time, I'd ask for a motion and a second to adopt the project resolution as presented. Motion by Matt Goodwin. I'll second. By Nate Schuler. All in favor? Aye. Motion carried 5-0. Next, I'd ask Lauren to please summarize the preliminary determination resolution.
Thank you. The preliminary determination resolution is required anytime the school corporation plans to use bond proceeds in excess of a certain threshold to finance a capital project. Includes some of the same parameters that are included in your project resolution, but in addition to those, it includes things like that, the maximum annual payment, the maximum term, the estimated tax impact that we talked about.
Any questions? Otherwise, I entertain a motion to approve and second the adoption of the preliminary determination resolution.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Elaine, second by Mary Eckert. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried 5-0. Next, if Lauren, do you mind the reimbursement resolution as it relates to the financing of the construction project?
This is the final resolution for the bonds this evening. The reimbursement resolution basically calls for the school to have the ability to reimburse itself out of bond proceeds to the extent that you need to spend any dollars out of your operations fund or your rainy day fund for construction or design fees or expenses that may be incurred prior to closing on bond issuance. So under federal tax law, by adopting this resolution, it preserves the school corporation's ability to reimburse itself. It does not require you to do so.
Entertain a motion and a second to approve the reimbursement resolution as presented. I'll make the motion. Motion by Nate. Second. Second by Matt Goodwin. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried 5-0. And thank you, Lauren. Anything else? If not, then entertain a motion to adjourn the
Meeting.
Motion by Matt Eckert, second by Elaine, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Thank you, everyone.
How many times you gotta go through this?